Jesus called Sophia by three names, not in public, not in sermons, in the moment of her rescue, according to a Coptic manuscript that survived the fires of the 4th century. And every single one of those three names was removed from the translations you can find in any library. The Pistis Sophia was discovered in 1773. The original text, written in Coptic, is held at the British Museum. The names are there. They have always been there. But when the manuscript was translated into English, French, and German, the names vanished. If you have ever felt that Sophia was more than a symbol, that she had something you were supposed to know by name, your instinct is correct. What were the three names, and who decided you should never hear them? The story begins with a Scottish traveler named James Bruce. In 1773, he returned from Egypt carrying a bundle of leather-bound pages. The pages were written in Sahidic Coptic, the language of early Egyptian Christians, and they had survived for more than 1,400 years in the dry heat of the Upper Nile. Bruce had no idea what he was carrying. He deposited the manuscript in Oxford, and then it disappeared into the quiet of a library shelf for almost a century. And what I am about to reveal has layers that a single video cannot contain. For those who have been watching this channel and sensing that the fragments are pointing to something larger, the complete initiation exists. It is in the pinned comment. But stay with me now, because this next part changes everything. The manuscript sat untouched until a German scholar named Carl Schmidt finally translated it into German in 1891. Then an English translation appeared in 1896 by G.R.S. Mead, and a more scholarly one by Violet MacDermott in 1978. Three translations, three opportunities to bring forward what the Coptic text actually said, and in all three something very specific disappeared. Here is what the manuscript contains. Pistis Sophia is a long dialogue between the risen Jesus and his closest disciples, including Mary Magdalene, after the resurrection. In it, Jesus narrates the fall of Sophia, a divine feminine being who descended from the highest realms of light into the material world, where she was trapped by hostile powers. And Jesus narrates her rescue. But during that rescue, at the most charged moments of the text, Jesus does not simply call her Sophia. He addresses her by three distinct names, names that carry meaning, names that in the Coptic original are written out in full, names that in the popular translations were replaced by the single generic word Sophia, or by cautious paraphrases that flattened their weight into nothing. Why would a translator do this? Part of the answer is linguistic caution. The three names are technical terms from older Gnostic texts, and a translator working for a Christian academic audience might have felt that rendering them literally would confuse the reader. But the other part of the answer is theological, because those three names, taken together, reveal something about Sophia that the Church of Rome, the Church of Constantinople, and every Protestant body that inherited their scriptures could not afford to let stand. The names imply that Sophia is not a minor character in the cosmic drama. The names imply that she is the origin of the drama. And if you have ever felt, reading the Bible you grew up with, that something feminine was missing, that something motherly had been surgically removed from the account of creation, you are detecting exactly that absence. You are detecting the silence where the three names used to live. The church fathers knew about these names. Hippolytus wrote against them in the 3rd century. Epiphanius of Salamis listed them in his catalogue of heresies in the 4th century. Irenaeus of Lyon mentioned them in the 2nd century. These names were not invented by modern mystics. They were known, feared, and actively suppressed by the men who built orthodoxy. So what were they? And what do they actually say about Sophia? That is where we are going next. The first name is Barbelo. Most people who have spent time in spiritual circles have never heard it spoken out loud, and yet Barbelo appears, by name, in at least 7 different Coptic manuscripts from Nag Hammadi. She appears in the Apocryphon of John. She appears in the Gospel of Judas. She appears in specific moments in Pistis Sophia itself. And in every one of those texts, Barbelo is not a minor angel. She is the first emanation of the monad, the first thought of the unknowable God, the feminine intelligence through which all other divine beings come into existence. In the Apocryphon of John, which is one of the most complete Gnostic cosmologies ever recorded, the text describes the unknowable source looking into a pool of pure light and seeing its own reflection. That reflection becomes a person, and that person is Barbelo. She is called, and I am paraphrasing, the Coptic, the first thought, the image of the invisible, the womb of everything. Now connect that to Sophia. In Pistis Sophia, at the moment when Jesus descends into the lower realms to find Sophia trapped among the hostile powers, he does not address her as a fallen being. He addresses her by a name that, in the Coptic text, carries the signature of Barbelo, not as two separate entities, but as aspects of the same primordial feminine. The implication is devastating for Orthodox theology, because if Sophia carries the name Barbelo in the moment of her rescue, then her fall into matter was not an accident. It was not a mistake. It was the descent of the first thought of God into the world that would be built by her descent. She did not fall, she chose. And that single shift from victim to agent rewrites everything you were taught about the feminine in Christianity. Think about what you were told. You were told that a woman ate a fruit and brought death into the world. You were told that salvation came through a man who corrected her error. You were told that the feminine needed to be rescued, covered, silenced, or redeemed. Now read Pistis Sophia carefully, with the name Barbelo restored, and the story inverts. Sophia is not the one who needed rescuing because she made a mistake. Sophia is the one who descended on purpose so that consciousness could exist in matter, so that beings like you and me could wake up inside the prison she chose to enter. Jesus is not correcting her. Jesus is recognizing her. Can you feel how different that is? Can you feel in your body that something rearranges when the story is told this way? And if you have ever felt, sitting in a church, that the version being preached from the pulpit was missing something enormous, something that made the whole architecture tilt, you were correct. You were detecting the absence of Barbelo. But the church had a reason for erasing this name, because a Sophia who is Barbelo is not someone the male priesthood can mediate. She is the source of the priesthood itself. She does not need bishops to explain her. She precedes them by an order of magnitude. So the name was cut. Carl Schmidt translated the passage and chose to render the Coptic word as simply Sophia, adding no footnote about the technical meaning. Mead followed him. MacDermott, writing 70 years later, acknowledged the term in footnotes but kept it out of the main text. And the English reader, sitting in 1920 or 1950 or 2010, opened the book and had no idea that a specific, named, cosmically foundational identity had been quietly paraphrased into nothing. But there is a second name, and the second name reveals something that Barbelo alone cannot, because Barbelo tells you who Sophia was before the fall. The second name tells you what she was doing when the universe was being thought into existence. And once you understand that, you begin to understand why the ancient Gnostics believed that knowing these names was itself a form of salvation. Not because the names are magic, but because remembering them is remembering yourself. The second name is protenoia. Pro means first. Enoia means thought. Protenoia is the first thought, the thinking that happens before there is a mind to contain it. And in a Nag Hammadi text called Trimorphic Protenoia, or the three forms of first thought, this name is unpacked with a precision that modern philosophy would envy. The text is written in the first person. Protenoia speaks directly, and what she says is that she was present before anything else existed. She says, and again I am paraphrasing the Coptic carefully, I am the thought that dwells in the light. I am the movement that dwells in the all. I am the invisible one within the all. She is not describing a being who exists inside creation. She is describing the act of consciousness that makes creation possible. And I need to stop here for a moment, because what I just explained, that exact architecture of how the soul became trapped and where the exits are, is the reason I created the ancient code. It is not an